Hello, everyone. This is Billy Peterson. Welcome to Peterson Wealth Services Point of View for today, August 7th, 2023. Today, Shaun and Cade join me. We wanted to bring you some of the issues that we think are on top of everyone's mind in this strange and crazy world we're living in. The things that people are concerned about with their investment portfolios, with the world in general, things that are coming up. So we're going to bring in some charts and talk about the things that we're watching, things that concern each and every one of us, and what we talk about here in the office and how we're dealing with it, the plan that we have in place for each of you, because what we're here to do is protect and manage your money. So the first chart I want to talk about today has to do with our country's deficit. And you know that I talk about this extensively. I write about it. One of those things that I watch. It frustrates me to think that we talk about people managing their money carefully and with some thought and with an appreciation of having excess spending or excess capital, at the end of every month or year in order to put money away for their retirement and to do the things that they need to do and be fiscally responsible. Yet our own government never follows that rule of law. They continue to spend more and more and more. And this goes into the political landmines. But we all know that governments and congressmen and women spend money just to appease voters. So this is a voter grab. We're in a government deficit. We created huge excess spending when we went through the pandemic, and you can see through this chart dating all the way back to the 1930s. So this is back to World War II. Prior to that, even a Great Depression, and we see all these red bars, and this is the percentage of spending relative to GDP, which stands for gross domestic product. There are very few blue bars, very few times we've had a budget surplus. And that, to me, is just makes more sense, of course, to have a country which is more stable, more financially secure than one that is always in the red, always spending more. And we watch this, and Congress always gets to that point where we need to raise the debt limit, so they have to fight over that and argue over it and get political. And it's funny that we continue to raise the spending limit. Could you imagine running a household like that where you are in the red already, but you're fighting over having the ability to, or not ability to, raise the amount you're spending every month?
You mean I just can't get imaginary money in my household, Billy?
You can. I mean, you can print it. You can try. A lot of people have done that.
Just max out some credit cards and
you
make
spend
the minimum payment,
what
right?
you don't have. You spend it, and then worry about consequences later. And that's really what's going on in our country. The consequences are huge amounts of inflation. Interest rates are going up, 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 and people are now predicting that rates are going to level off and maybe even start cutting rates next year. I'm not there yet. I'm looking out there in the economy, and I know that they're trying to slow the economy by raising rates this quickly, but to me, I haven't seen it. We talk about this here in the office of the spending going on, people that we see everywhere that you look, people are out there spending more and more. Restaurants are always packed. People are driving brand new vehicles, boats, recreation vehicles, trips. People are just seem to be spending. Now there's getting to be a very clear division in our country of the have and have nots. And the lower end people are struggling to get by because inflation's eating everything alive. They can't keep up. Their wages are not increasing commensurate with the amount of inflation that we have. And that's just costing them more money to feed their family, to drive around to work, to do everything that they need to do. It's just the cost of growing up. We can see that day-to-day life. You can see what's going on. It concerns me, the deficit and the continuation of spending, because that creates more and more inflation. I'm watching this. This is one of my biggest ones. The next chart shows what we're doing from the standpoint of the deficit on a year-over-year basis since 1980. And this just kind of gets a little bit more detailed, the dollar amount of the deficit. So on the left axis, you can see the dollar amount anywhere from 500 billion to 3 trillion. So this is measured in billions. Right now, we're sitting at a $1.4 trillion deficit. Trillion, that's a lot of money. And I go back to the 80s and when I look at the deficit, it was always kind of manageable, not too far below the break-even point, so less than 2% in most years. Right now, we're at 5.4% of GDP deficit. It's come back from obviously the lows reached during the pandemic with the crazy amount of spending that we pumped into the economy we didn't have. But they're talking about even more. You know, we passed, or legislators passed $6 trillion of extra spending during that period of time, which was all self-made, self-inflicted wound. And now they want to spend their way out of it. And now they're talking about spending on climate change and climate initiative. And so we are watching all of these things from an economic standpoint. And what does this do to our investment strategies? How do we take and manage this and navigate all of these things that are going on? We never worry about politics to make decisions necessarily as an investor from a standpoint of, do I want to invest this year or do I want to sit it out? That's not what we're saying. But it does have an impact on the types of investment we choose and how we can stay ahead of the game. Shaun's going to talk a little bit about what's working. Cade's going to wrap up with the things that we're doing here as a firm and what we don't recommend. So some people take fear to the next level. And I mean fear. And fear is what drives all these concerns for us and why government can get away with all this spending, because a huge portion of the population is stuck and gripped in fear. They think that the world's going to end. I mean, climate has got to a point where we're all going to die. But just go back and put your thinking cap on for just a minute and go back all the predictions that we've had in the last 100 years. None of them, not one of them has come true. Because back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s and the 1900s, the huge prediction there and every alarm bell was ringing that the earth was cooling and we were going into a new ice age. Isn't it funny now that that's just gone? We don't even worry about that anymore. The conversations that we had, everybody had to live with that and make changes. And we were going to do all these things from a standpoint of regulations because we were dealing with the ice age that was looming. Food supply was going to be gone. All of those things that were predicted by not just the media. These were high-ranking government officials, climatologists, environmentalists, et cetera, et cetera. What are we doing now? Just the opposite. Now the earth is warming. And now we've got global warming, all the polar ice caps are melting. I mean, they predicted so many times, and I could go on for an hour about all the experts, so-called experts in the field, who predicted that the world was going to end by 2012. Al Gore, who was the leading expert in our country, was predicting we were going to be underwater. All of the major cities in Europe were going to be underwater.
They made a movie about it, Billy. I think it was literally called 2012, and it was about the end of the world. So
yeah, end of the world.
We watched it and we moved on. So we're still here.
We're still here, but I wanted to bring that up. I don't want to belabor the point, but I just want to make sure people are not just glued to the media and stuck on fear, because you can find yourself slipping into that. So think for a minute and go back in time and decide if this is actually for sure the case, because they were sure of it. Remember all those different times. They were sure of it. They had science backing them up. And the same thing's going on now, but I think it's at probably 10 times more so, the fear that's propagating. And we have warm temperatures going on. You know, is it possible, though, that the Earth's temperature just changes every so often? We go through these cycles. Just food for thought. Let's continue on with this conversation.
Yeah, I think I'll just add a couple comments, Billy. I mean, I think what you're talking about is when you're running a deficit, and back to your household example, you have to decide what's important to spend money on, what's not important, where do you cut your spending to get back to a surplus. And I think that's where government officials fail, because a lot of money I know is being pumped into climate change, right? And some people think that's very important, but you got to go back and look at the facts and the statistics. We're funding, a war over in Ukraine, which, and I don't want to sound mean or like I don't have feelings towards that, but we have our own problems. We have places where we could use that money. I mean, I drive down the freeway and our bridges and roads are terrible. Okay. So we could be reinvesting in ourselves, providing more jobs, but we're shipping billions and billions of dollars over to other countries to fund a war, or whether it's trying to make China fight global uh, climate change, which they have the worst air in the world. We have some of the cleanest air in the world. So it's like
They're not
this.
worried about it a bit, and they have
They're
the
not,
same
and
data and
we're paying for it.
right, exactly. We pay for everybody in the world, but everyone else is just continuing to get stronger militarily. Again, we're all on the same Earth, the same planet.
Sure.
So let's focus on what we can do, and let's just stay in that environment where we know, hey, we're going to take care of our land, and I'm all about clean air, clean water.
Of
I've said
course.
that before, but we don't need to take it to the nth degree. Again, with a fear-based initiative, that's my biggest point. We don't have that money. Let's think about what other issues are going on. We spent 100 and something million just in the city of New York alone to deal with the the illegal border crossings, the people that are
That's
coming
another
up into
thing.
these
Yeah.
cities. So where do we allocate dollars? This is going back to what we are concerned about here in the U.S.
Yeah. And what adds to the US budget? Where does the revenue come from? Taxes, right? How do you produce more tax revenue? Provide jobs. Well, we did the opposite. We paid people to stay home. And now they weren't working, they weren't providing to that bottom line. And now it's, I mean, you know as well as I do, trying to find employees, or you go somewhere and the service is slow because they can't find people to work there. It's just a backwards environment right now. And it's just, lack of a better word, it's weird. It really is. So, all right. Should we talk about the market a little bit?
Let's do.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to talk a little bit about sectors. We're dicing up the S&P 500 here, and a lot of people don't know. You look at the news and everything, you think, hey, the market's maybe not doing all that well, but it's doing pretty well overall. I mean, the S&P 500 is up just shy of 17% year to date, which is a very good return. However, it's being driven by a couple of sectors, and I think it's important to understand that technology and
Telecom.
communications, telecom. Okay, really driving the market this year. You strip those out of the S&P 500, those type of companies. I'm talking like your Nvidias, your Broadcoms, your Teslas, your Googles. These, and I'll get into the FANG stock chart next. But it's really your returns go from very, very good to maybe just okay. I'd say maybe 5 or 6% on the S&P 500 if you strip those sectors out. And why are we talking about this? We're talking about it because some people might say, well, why don't we own just all technology stocks? Why don't we just own one sector of the market? And the reason being is because we look back at history, and there's plenty of times over and over where you see an industry or a sector lead, and then boom, you see a huge drop. A good example is the tech bubble of the early 2000s. Technology was leading the way then. And some of those companies dropped 80+%. Some of them went belly up. They went completely bankrupt. So that's why you'll never see us chasing. I will say, though, in our models, in our portfolios, we have been overweight in growth. We have been overweight in technology this year. We reduced some of our energy holdings at the first of the year. And you can see energy's underperformed. I'm not saying we always get it right, but we are tactical in the way that we're managing our client assets and our models right now.
Real quick from me, tying into why these sectors are doing so well this year has a lot to do with the government spending. And when you talk about the billions and trillions that were pumped into the economy, a good chunk of that went toward these companies. With their employees staying home, with them trying to then be more efficient, with companies utilizing or needing new technologies and what consumers are demanding. Hey, technology is where it's at. New software, new development, new
Yeah.
storage capabilities. That's where that's where earnings are coming from, and
Yeah,
so earnings
artificial
drive the market.
intelligence, right? Yeah, earnings. That's where it's all going right now. No one wants to own an AT&T or a Verizon or some just boring utility stock right now. But there's times when you're going to want to own them, and that's
Yeah.
why we always remain diversified.
Let's
All
go
right.
on to that next chart.
All right, this is a very, very good chart. So it goes back 5 years. You've got a bunch of different squiggly lines on there. So I'm going to walk through them here, but I'm going to start at the bottom. It's the red line. It's the equal weight S&P 500. So you take 500 largest US companies and you equal weight them in an index. What has the total return been over the last 5 years? 44%. You go up to the gold yellowish line there, just the S&P as is, 58%. And this is where it really starts to get interesting because you're seeing a big separation. Many of you've maybe heard the term FANG stock. So this is your now Meta, was Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Netflix, and Google. So just tracking those companies over the last 5 years, 108% return. Okay. You just look into the tech sector of the S&P 500, 137% return. Major outperformance than rather if you just own the S&P. So you're seeing where we've had this kind of revolution in the technology space where you're seeing lots of money flowing towards these, lots of earnings. So they've been great performers. But again, we're showing you year to date and 5 years numbers. Those are not long-term numbers. So we don't want to get sucked too far into just owning one part of the market. Yeah, we may overweight, underweight at sometimes, but long term, it's proven to stay diversified. So you're avoiding these huge dips, especially for someone that's in retirement and maybe in distribution mode.
Yeah, we're going to own a lot of these in our models,
We
but
are.
you can see what happened during that. Look at the 2022 calendar year for that blue line. I think it's blue. It is the FANG stocks. So just those five,
Right.
and you've got a huge decline during 2022. Everyone was concerned the market was going into recession. Bond yields were rising. You had a terrible interest rate environment. So these stocks dropped 50 to 60%, some of them even more than that. Now look at the gold line, the S&P itself. It didn't drop nearly as much, still had about a
Right.
20% decline. But again, technology was a terrible place to own, during that year. Now it's come back and even resurfaced almost to where it was before.
Yeah. Pretty interesting chart there. Some good numbers. All right, Cade, you ready to bring us on home here?
I'm ready.
Okay.
Yeah, last chart here for you guys that we wanted to add in is, I'm driving to work and all I hear about recently is the political environment. Just this morning, they're saying the Dow's up about 300 points. Next up, we're going to talk about Trump's indictment and we're going to talk about Hunter Biden. And that's pretty much all you're hearing about right now. And what I'll go back to is one thing that Billy mentioned is that those things don't dictate, the overall investment decisions that we make. We're going to make changes to the allocations and you guys will see those come through. We'll take some stocks out, some mutual funds, or we'll add some in. But those political events or the people that are elected, they're not going to dictate what we do. So what we would say to you guys is focus on what you can control. You can vote, you can talk to your elected officials, and you can also, you're the one that's in control of your money. So I would avoid letting the mainstream media dictate how you feel about your investment decisions in the stock market in general. And that's one reason why we like this chart so much. It goes back to 1928. So this is a very long-term chart, almost 100 years. You can see all these very significant events. A lot of them are a lot more significant than Trump's indictment or Hunter Biden's laptop. You got the Great Depression. We got the Vietnam War. You guys can read these. Financial crisis in 2008, the COVID pandemic. These are all extremely significant events. And guess what? The S&P 500 grew from $1,000 to $252,000 over that stretch. And we're not saying you're going to be an investor for, 92 years or however long that is. But what we are saying is that the market is resilient. Companies find a way to work through who's in office or what policies come. And that's why you see this chart on such a, steep incline.
Great points,
Beautiful.
Cade.
It's a great way to summarize everything that we're doing because take it into context. Once you have enough years piled together, the market's going to look pretty good over a period of time. There's going to be stretches when it's not so good or it can be ugly. But the problem we have is people that try to time that. And I've never seen anybody expertly get in and get out. It's impossible because the fear is what's driving those decisions, fear or greed. And those are the worst combinations when you're trying to make investment decisions. So the best bet we've found, and even in uncomfortable times, is to stay in the boat and just ride this through, have an advisor that's going to be making some changes, hopefully the right ones, but not based on fear or greed. We're watching those things very closely. We showed you those tech charts because, hey, there may be a point where technology gets a bit stretched. So unfortunately, when we make a lot of money, the next problem is, hey, good old Uncle Sam wants a piece of that when we sell. So don't don't yell at us if we try to pull a little bit off the table there to say these valuations are a bit lofty and we want to book some profits. Profits profits are good. Uncle Sam, yell at them if you want. Don't yell at us. We're just trying to manage the money in the best way we know how. Hey, and one other thing, don't forget our podcast out there. It's Harnessing Your Wealth. It's on all the podcast platforms, so Spotify and Apple, iTunes. Listen in and follow us if you will. Comment, give us some feedback. Let us know if there's some topics that you'd like us to talk about. We know a few of you have asked for us to comment on things that are pertinent to account management and tax minimization and things like that. And we're happy to do our best to answer those questions. We've been also asked to help some of the younger generation with getting a start on the right ways to invest and how to build wealth over time, make good decisions. Boy, the wealth conversation for the youth is such a critical one, so important. And you as a parent, if you're listening in or grandparent, you have some responsibility in that. I'll just say it flat out. Take some time to educate your children or grandchildren. And even if you don't have a lot of the knowledge, hey, tell them to talk to us. Call one of us, and we're happy to have a meeting or set up a call with them to get them started on the right foot, get the right track, if you will, how to manage it, put an account up, set up the right account, and then get contributing to it over a regular period of time. It can make a huge difference in in their life, how it ends up financially. So until next time, thanks for tuning in to our point of view today. You guys all take care out there.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.